Hey there, and welcome to this third and final video showing you how I built this combination wood burning pizza oven and slow smoke barbecue cooker. In this part I'm going to show you how I did the chimney, the insulation, the outer dome, the firebox for the smoker, and a few other things. If you want to see the first or second video of this build, go ahead and click on the link below or just go to my channel and subscribe to it if you're smart. So in the last video, we ended up getting done with the inner dome of the oven, and the first thing I did when I got the inner dome done was to build the mouth of the oven and the flue opening right here at the front of the oven, and did this basically the same way I did the other inside arch. Just built a form right along here and dropped it out once I got the brick set up. But one detail I wanted to point out to you that you may miss is this inner lip here on the inside, basically on the same plane as the inside of the flue opening. And the reason for this lip is to basically seal off the oven with a door. Now you may be thinking, Lee, you're an idiot. The fire cannot stay lit when the door is on the oven. It can't get any air, and you are correct, but this is done after the fire goes out or you remove the coals out of the oven. And the theory here is if you put an insulated door here, you've created a massive heat sink on the inside of this oven in this dome, and if you seal it off, then the oven stays at a pretty high temperature for up to like 24 hours. So in theory, if you put that insulated door on here, you could roast a chicken, bake some bread in here the next day. And I haven't had the energy to try it out yet to see how it works, but I'm sure from what people tell me it works pretty good, and just haven't had the energy to build this insulated door. So when you build your oven, the mouth of the oven, you want to go ahead and put this lip in. Whether you use it or not is up to you. So once the inner dome and the throat of the oven were complete and the dome had cured for about a week, I started the process of test fires. This is a series of ever-increasing fires. I'd say at least 5 of them, which I did as I started work on the chimney and the outside of the oven. You want to do this slowly to get the inner dome up to its working temperature and get everything settled in place and ensure you don't have any masonry failures. This also lets you know if your oven's drafting the way you want it to before you cover everything up. So here are some pictures of how I did the offset chimney. The first thing I did was lay down a bed of perlite concrete over the front of the oven dome, and then I also put on a fairly thick bed of it over the top center where the chimney was going to be located. I smoothed out the top of the perlite with some fire mortar to make a smooth surface where the smoke would be traveling. Then I cut a large piece of clay flue pipe in half. I think it was around 13 inches by 13 inches, and I mortared that above the layer of perlite and transitioned that into the vertical chimney flue. There was a lot of cutting and fitting to do to get it to transition correctly, but as I was doing all this, I was continuing the test fires, and they were getting pretty big by now, and I wanted to make sure my flue and chimney routing would draw well, and fortunately it did beautifully. As I started building the brick outer dome, I thought it might be a good idea to go ahead and mock up a temporary offset firebox to see how well this oven would work as a smoker. I built a temporary door for the mouth of the oven and threw together a few leftover pieces of brick and flue material to make the firebox, and then smoked some ribs in it, and it worked pretty well. So I continued on down the line of making this into a combo oven smoker. So I kept coming up with the brick on the outer dome similar to the inner dome, and I went ahead and purchased some high temperature batt insulation from Forno Bravo to insulate the outer dome, and it's a really good and efficient piece of insulation and will stand up to the heat, which regular batt insulation won't. But it's fairly expensive and it will not support any weight at all. Batt insulation loses a lot of its R value if you compress it. So the batt insulation is a great solution if you're tight on space, because inch per inch on thickness, This is a lot more efficient than perlite, but I didn't have much of a space constraint, so I wrapped the inner dome with batts and filled the rest of the space up with loose perlite. Towards the top of the oven, I went back to the perlite concrete to give me a little strength and cohesiveness to the insulation at the top of the dome. And then I precast a concrete plate that would help support the outer brick of the chimney. I put that in place, ran the brick up, and I precast a couple of other pieces to finish out the top and to protect the chimney from rain. That last top piece was a nightmare getting on top of the chimney. Here I am topping it out. At this point I had a fully functional oven, and in the construction business we have a tradition when a building is topped out that we have a topping out party. So I made my first pizza, and it wasn't too bad for the first one. If you notice in the pictures of the outside of the oven, I've got a band of brick here near the base of the oven. I left this brick recessed because I intend to put some tile here. I'm thinking like a blue or maybe a multicolored band of Mexican type tile would look great here, but I haven't been able to find anything that I thought would really fit the bill with regards to the size and thickness and color. Here's a picture of what I was thinking, and I haven't really put 100% effort into this, into finding the right tile, but I've looked pretty hard. I know somebody with a ceramic kiln, and I thought I might end up making the tiles myself, because I only need like 28 of them. If I do that, I'll go ahead and post a video of that process, because I'm sure that'll be interesting. So by this time, I'm totally sick of laying brick, but I still have a lot of brick to lay around the base of the oven. I first finished up the brick around the sides of the wood storage area. Then I brought up the rest of the brick on the outside up to the level of the structural hearth. Now that I had the sides of the oven pretty much done, I turned my attention to the box for the smoker. I poured a small concrete pad and built an inner box out of fire brick, and topped it off with the other half of the clay chimney flue pipe that I laid on a slope. And then I built the outer walls and the roof with old Chicago brick. I filled the void between them with perlite and sand, just trying to keep the outside of the box from getting too hot. This box may look pretty small, but it doesn't have to be real big. You don't need a huge hot fire here, just a small smoldering one to cook the food and smoke the food slow and low. And I went ahead and put a cast iron door here. This one's made by a company called Vogelzang. I think I found it on the internet. And this will let me control the temperature of the fire a little bit. And it's worked pretty well. So the next thing I had to get done was the top and the front landing of the oven. I decided I wanted a bluish gray color concrete and did some test mixes. Bought some black dye from my local Lowe's store. The blue dye was a little harder to find, so I ended up using actually some latex paint, blue paint, and color came out pretty good. I decided I wanted to precast the pieces. I broke the top up into 5 sections and precast the first piece, and it turned out to be a lot harder to do that than I thought because of the fitment around the oven. So I ended up casting 3 of the remaining pieces in place, and then precasting the last piece, which was the front landing of the oven, which was the most prominent piece, precasting that to get a really slick finish on the top. As you can see from these pictures, none of it turned out really great. I even tried polishing it with polishers and densifier. Still didn't come out as slick as I want. Maybe one day I'll wreck those tops out and put granite in if I get rich someday. We'll see. The last thing I did was build a little prep table next to the oven. We have an architectural salvage yard that's pretty close to me that had these really thick pieces of granite, which they salvaged off the old Orlando City Hall building that was imploded back in the early 90s. You can watch this implosion if you rent the movie Lethal Weapon 3, because they used it in the opening scene. Anyway, I got it for about 75 bucks, and it's pretty thick, like 3 inches thick, home plate shape, perfect for laying your dough out and getting your pizza ready. So the first thing I did was poured a really good sized foundation. At least you want to go at least 2 foot by 2 foot, and put a couple of rebar dowels in it. Then I dry stacked 8 by 16 inch CMU block, and I dropped rebar in those and filled it with concrete. I wanted the granite to be solidly mounted into the base, so I ended up drilling holes into the bottom of that would line up to the block cells, drilling holes in the bottom of the granite. I took some epoxy and epoxied some all thread into the bottom of the granite. After the epoxy set up, I screwed toggle anchors to the all thread that would end up around 8 inches deep inside the filled concrete cell. I filled the concrete blocks with concrete and put a pretty good amount of epoxy on the surface of the block that the granite would be setting on, and wet stuck that top with the all thread toggle anchors into the block, into the concrete in the block. It's about as solid as you can get. The granite is really slick, and I use it to roll out my dough directly on it when I make pizza. When you get done, you can just hit it with a hose to clean it off, and makes it pretty easy. So as you can see from some of the pictures, I was experimenting with putting some lime plaster on the base to finish it, but didn't like it, so I ended up getting some copper sheets and wrapping that directly on the base using clamps and liquid nails. The idea here is that it will eventually patina to a really nice green. I also planted some clinging vines at the base, but as you can see from those pictures, the vines do not like the copper at all and just won't cling to it. I need to dig those out someday and do something different. And it's been about 5 years since I did the copper, and it still hasn't gotten that patina yet, and I think it's because the top protects it from the weather, but it'll eventually get there and it's going to look pretty good. So here's the last thing I did to the oven. I wanted to show you, which is essential. And stay tuned to my channel if you want to see some recipes and me cook some stuff in here. You can subscribe. If you got any questions, hopefully I can help you out if you're actually going to build one of these. And thanks for watching.